Mitchell Trubisky is a Pittsburgh Steeler. And so that takes one of the potential Jimmy Garoppolo destinations off the table for the 49ers as we sit here on Monday afternoon.
Yeah, I wouldn't say shocking because we knew old Mitchell was going to sign somewhere. I read before we hopped on that his decision ultimately came. Remember, we had thought Mitchell would end up with the Giants with Brian Daboll. But I think ultimately he realized the Steelers a better chance to start. You know, they did draft once upon a time Daniel Jones 6 overall, and I think the owner's going to want to see him play. He's going to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I don't think Mitchell's any good. I would clearly much rather have, if Jimmy's able to throw, Jimmy Garoppolo as my quarterback over Mitchell Trubisky, but it's not that simple in a vacuum. I haven't seen the money on Mitchell Trubisky, but it can't be very much, one. And two, they didn't have to give up any assets in terms of draft capital to acquire him. So it's an easier move. Now they're getting, to me, a lesser player, and if Mitch Trubisky starts 17 games for the Steelers, I think they're going to struggle to win 9 games. They might have enough talent just to be really competitive, in that 8 kind of range. But I also think this kind of shows that feels like they'll draft a quarterback. Maybe like a Malik Willis take a swing with Mitch, but ultimately they avoid giving any draft compensation to get Jimmy, especially if it's, as a wise man said, that there's a second-round pick on the table. You're not going to bid for that.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, the other thing is, the money is the whole story here.
It is, but whether he costs, let's say, $9 million or $12 million, Mr. Trubisky then is your starting quarterback. Regardless what it costs, he's your starting quarterback. They're going to try to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if he costs $4 million or $5 million, then he's your starting quarterback. But if something else falls in your lap, it allows you to do that something else, right? And as we saw last year with the Bears, Andy Dalton was their starting quarterback until they drafted a quarterback, and he wasn't their starting quarterback, but he kind of was. But it was weird. So,
but Justin Fields is a much farther along, let's say, than Malik Willis if they draft him, right?
Yeah, and Fields kind of fell in their lap, right? And they still forced the Andy Dalton thing. Yeah. What I was thinking was more in the lines of if it's $4 million for Mitchell Trubisky and then Jimmy Garoppolo somehow. Let's say you liked Jimmy more, and I'm not saying you necessarily would have to like Jimmy more, even though I agree Jimmy is the better quarterback. What would stop you from maybe doing something like that? That's where I think the money matters on Mitchell.
That's fair. You're saying could you get Jimmy for 15 and a bunch of incentives and Mitch, and those are your 2 quarterbacks?
Yeah, and Jimmy's been hurt, but you got Trubisky, and your quarterback room costs you $21 million or something like that. That's where I think the Trubisky money matters. Now, I still think the door's probably still closed for the Steelers on Garoppolo, but if he were to get cut, maybe it's a different animal. Now, if you're Jimmy, would you go there if you were cut over, say, going to Indy, where you're definitely the starting quarterback? No, I wouldn't go there if I were cut. Right? We still don't Carolina, New Orleans. That Deshaun thing has to play itself out. If New Orleans, if you're Garoppolo, Carolina's probably not overly attractive, but New Orleans might be pretty attractive to you. So him becoming a free agent, why would he pick Pittsburgh if he were a free agent? If Trubisky's there already, but that's anyway. That was my point. It's like the money really matters to me.
I do think it's pretty telling that as of doing this, we don't have the Mitchell money. To me, that's very telling because agents want out all the fake money. There might be no fake money. It just might be 1 year, $5 million.
Yeah.
You don't brag about that, right? You would have bragged, to me immediately, if he got 1 year, $16 million, it would have already been out. It ain't out. So I think they got him on the cheap, which you're right. I mean, it just continues to leave options open because if you view Mitch Trubisky as a backup, well, if you get Jimmy for 12, if he's cut, because you're not trading for him now. Again, you couldn't with the $27
Not for the money. Not unless he were to rework his contract. But again, why would he rework his contract to come to the Steelers where Mitchell Trubisky's sitting? So,
yeah. But it was a good spot in terms of, if you are going to be a starting quarterback, the Steelers are a very competitive team, right?
It was a great spot for Jimmy. It was probably one of the top 2 spots for Garoppolo.
That in Indy?
I think so, right?
I would put the Saints right there, too. I mean, they have a bunch of good offensive players. They have a really good defense.
Great home field advantage.
I think their main question is just that this unknown, I mean, he's known. We saw him coach, but It's like, do you want to give Dennis Allen a little bit of a reprieve? Lack of judgment for those couple years with the Raiders. They were a pretty big joke talent-wise. I mean, I want those teams were not exactly super talented. It's hard to just say he'll suck forever, but he was not good.
Yeah, he might. But we can give him a open-minded would be the best way I'd put it. Like I'm not expecting him to show the world what he's made of and bring revenge upon the Raiders. But I'm sure we'll be open-minded about it. And maybe they actually have a little more stability in their skill guys than the Steelers do, as crazy as that is to say, because Juju and Claypool, it's weird with both. I mean, Juju might be gone. We already thought that once. Now, Kamara's got a legal issue perhaps to deal with, but could be a little more stable from that
Michael
standpoint.
Thomas never showed up.
Michael Thomas, but, I just the bottom line, I think, we're coming up with a few theories here and there. Ultimately, I think the headline is that this hurts. Mitchell Trubisky to the Steelers hurts the 49ers leverage in a Jimmy Garoppolo trade. Like that is the big headline. And, some of what we've said to this point is part of a separate part of that conversation, but that's the bottom line. It hurts their leverage with the Indianapolis Colts and any other Jimmy Garoppolo potential destination. And two of the other destinations, New Orleans and Carolina, have been reported as the headline places for Deshaun. So neither one of them, if you could get Deshaun, is going to rush into Jimmy until they know they're not getting Deshaun.
I think if you're the Niners, and I think Schefter, Rap Sheet, reported this morning that he's going to meet with them in the next day, both teams. I don't know if that's
Deshaun's going to meet with those two.
Yeah, if he's going to fly around. I think you're rooting for him to go to Carolina.
Yeah.
Because then the Saints get pretty desperate in the sense of, like the Steelers, the Saints are going to try to make the playoffs this year. Obviously, the Panthers would too, but I can't see them going after Jimmy. To me, the Saints make a lot of sense for Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think you're rooting for Deshaun Watson to go to Carolina. And honestly, geographically, it might make the most sense. We talked about it yesterday on the pod, right? He's from that area. Clemson's not far away. I heard Coward say it's just natural ACC country. It's just very, not that the Saints, that's also Southern football country, but it's SEC. It's a little different. I would say that Carolina, again, I would be leery if I was him both places. I think you got major question marks, right? This in both coaching situations, especially Carolina. But at least the owner has a lot of money. And I bet the owner will tell him it's different because baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but they have that tax. You see the Mets owner was like, I don't give a shit about the tax. I think Tepper will talk like that to guys like Deshaun Watson. Like, I will do whatever it takes to get us sweet players. I have unlimited cash, and I will go Kroenke where it feels like I think the reason it feels like they have no salary cap because they're constantly signing contracts and just moving money down, but he doesn't mind continue to just give cash out. And a lot of owners, you can tell, are a little like the Bengals have done it the last couple years, but they're kind of picking their spots. And even this year they let some guys walk to go to the Jags. Look who kind of is the mark right now. It would be the Jags because I think the owner has a bunch of money and he's desperate to win. So it's when you can get these guys that are really rich and are desperate to win, I think you root for Deshaun to go there, and then it gives Jimmy the Indy. Because what the fuck's Indy going to do? Indy ain't trying to not win.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to I want to go back to Deshaun just for a second, which is, I think there would probably be, if you're in the position that Deshaun's in right now, there's probably a comfort level that comes with being able to sit across from the owner and the owner saying to you, we've got your back, which is, I'm sure, what David Tepper would say to him because David Tepper's trying to win him over. The Saints are a little more of a traditionally structured NFL team, right? He's not sitting down with the owner of the Saints, or maybe he is, but it's not like Tepper, where what Tepper does, Tepper gets. What Tepper wants, Tepper gets.
Yeah.
And Tepper, I would imagine, will be very forceful in that meeting to say to him, hey, man, you're our guy. We are going to protect. In this building, there will be no doubt about who's on your side, who believes in you, all that kind of stuff. The Deshaun story that he created with the lawsuits that are still probably coming is one thing. Don't forget, before that story, there was just the story of him wanting to get out of Houston because him and Cal McNair don't get along, right? Yeah. Him and the whole organization didn't get along. So that's part of to me, the backdrop of what's going on in Deshaun's head. And I think you're right. Now the Steelers are out. If Deshaun goes to the Saints, the Panthers are not a Garoppolo destination. So, but here's the problem is when is that meeting happening? Because the Steelers are already off the table.
24 hours. So hopefully tomorrow.
Hopefully Tuesday. It needs to happen quickly.
There is Zoom and Google Meets, But you know, I
That's
think
true.
this is the type situation where I give General Patton some credit. When they hired Nathaniel Hackett or were going through the process, he's like, we decided to fly to every candidate. He's like, this is too big of a decision for Zoom meetings. I was like, you know, I kind of like that. Like, I would imagine if you're sitting down with Deshaun Watson, it's a double whammy. The amount of trade compensation and what he has hanging over his head. Like, ultimately, the Broncos, when they traded for Russell Wilson, like, it's pretty well established what you're dealing with. Like, I don't know if you had to talk to him man-to-man if he was signed off on your team. Right? But I'd say Deshaun Watson falls under the category a little bit. It happened when I was in the NFL, and it continues to happen. You get these 30 visits during the draft, and most of the guys that you want to talk to, you talk to briefly at the combine. But I would say your top guys that have some question marks off the field, and it doesn't even have to be like a rest or anything. It just be like, you know, we're just a little uneasy with the write-up we have on this guy off the field. You fly that guy to your building. So you just get to, and you know, when I was in Philly, whenever we'd fly the red flag guy to the building, Jeffrey Lurie met with him. If it was just you're meeting with Mike McGlinchey, you know, you don't need to. But when you had whoever your red flag guys are, and there was, like, I would imagine Kayvon Thibodeau, and again, I'm not saying he's some major red flag, but there are questions on him. I bet John Mara talks to him, right? I bet,
especially your top 10 pick, right? Your first round pick.
And that's another thing. Yeah, owners like talking to top 10 picks.